In the beginning, before any rebellion, there was Lucifer. He was the highest of all angels, full of light and wisdom, brighter and more beautiful than any other being. His brilliance was not only in appearance, but in understanding. His mind was sharp, his insight deep. Whenever he moved through heaven, the air seemed to glow, and even the light of God's throne seemed to shine more fully in his presence. Angels looked at him with awe, for his glory reflected the Creator's power. He was called the morning star, the shining one, the bearer of light. Lucifer stood closest to the throne of God, nearest to the source of all life and light. He was entrusted with immense responsibility. He watched over the work of angels, guided their tasks, and carried the praises of heaven to God himself. The throne room stretched farther than the eye could see, filled with light that shifted like flowing rivers. Choirs of angels sang in harmony, their voices like countless bells and rushing waters. Trumpets of crystal and fire sounded, echoing endlessly, and the very air seemed alive with holiness. Among all this, Lucifer moved with calm confidence, certain of his place and his favor with God. Yet even in this perfect glory, a seed of pride began to stir within him. He looked upon his own light, his own beauty, his wisdom, and a thought crept into his mind. I will rise. I will be like the Most High. The words were soft, almost a whisper, but they carried the weight of rebellion. He imagined himself above the throne, not serving, but ruling over heaven itself. For the first time, he began to see himself not as a servant of God, but as a being equal to the Creator. He began to forget that every gift, every brilliance, every power he possessed was given to him, not earned. The angels around him danced in circles of shimmering light, singing songs of God's glory. Their wings glowed like fire and crystal, their voices carrying the praise of the Creator across the endless halls of heaven. Lucifer walked among them, admired and praised. Yet a shadow had begun to flicker in his heart. He wanted more than the honor already given to him. He wanted the throne itself. He wanted control, dominion, and recognition. That desire, the first trace of rebellion, took root. He was magnificent, and pride whispered to him. He could not see the danger. He could not know that the very brilliance that dazzled all of heaven could become the reason for his fall. The angels continued their praise, unaware that the greatest of them all was beginning to turn inward, dreaming of a throne above the Most High, a kingdom of his own making. Lucifer began to measure his own gifts, comparing them to the light of the throne. He recalled the admiration of the angels, the songs that praised him along with God, the authority given to him over heavenly hosts. Slowly, he began to believe that he deserved more than the glory of God, that his own light and wisdom were enough to rule. Every note of the angelic song seemed to fuel the thought, why should I serve when I could reign? Greater than greater than greater than greater than. He began to linger near the throne longer than before, observing the power and authority of God with both wonder and envy. He listened to the angels' praises and realized that he too was praised, sometimes even noticed above others. That small recognition, innocent at first, began to feed his ambition. He started to dream, not just of honor, but of absolute rule. The throne room, once a place of perfect joy and worship, now became a mirror for his growing desire. The music of heaven swelled around him. Light shimmered in waves through the endless halls. Angels danced, their voices like rivers of fire. Yet Lucifer's heart began to darken. Pride whispered louder, and the seed of rebellion grew. He saw himself not as the morning star, the greatest among angels, but as a ruler, a king of heaven, equal to God himself. He imagined the angels bending to his will, the heavens praising him above all others, the Creator yielding the glory that was his alone. The first shadow of sin had entered the heart of the brightest angel. He remained radiant, wise, and beloved. But the choice was forming in his mind, a choice that would change the course of all creation. The morning star, full of light, full of wisdom, full of glory, would one day fall from these heights. But for now, he walked among the angels, still admired, still radiant, still the shining one. Unaware that the story of his rebellion and the darkness to come had quietly begun. The pride that had quietly grown in Lucifer's heart now spread like fire. He no longer looked at God with humble love, Instead, he measured his own light against the glory of the Creator. "I will rise higher than the heavens," he whispered to himself. "I will place my throne above the stars. I will be like the Most High." The words were soft, almost a thought. Yet their weight was heavy in the heavens. Lucifer's rebellion did not start with violence or anger. It began in his mind in desire, in the refusal to fully submit. He spoke to the angels near him carefully, planting thoughts that tempted and excited them. Why should we serve when we could rule? Why bow when we could reign? Some angels drawn to his light and wisdom began to listen, were curious, tempted, and slowly convinced. Others stayed loyal to God, sensing danger in his pride. Heaven, once calm and full of harmony, became uneasy. Angels continued their duties, but the air was different. There was a tension that could be felt, though they did not yet understand why. Lucifer, full of pride, gathered angels who shared his desire to rise above God. Together they whispered and planned, not out of need, but out of ambition that had grown too large to contain. God, who sees all, knew Lucifer's thoughts and plans. The Most High, holy and just, spoke silently, and even the proud could feel it. Those who choose pride cannot remain in God's presence. Lucifer, radiant and powerful, felt the first shadow of fear. He understood in part that rebellion carried consequences, yet his pride would not let him turn back. The conflict began not with weapons, but with choices. Angels had to decide whether to stay loyal or follow Lucifer. Many were persuaded by his words and his brilliance. They joined him, believing they could rise with him. Others stood firm, refusing to leave God's side. The struggle was a war of hearts and wills, a fight between loyalty and ambition. Finally, Lucifer acted. With a cry of defiance, he declared that he would not serve God. He and the angels who followed him rose up in rebellion. The heavens shook. Light and power clashed as those who stayed loyal confronted those who had turned away. The force of their rebellion could be felt across creation. But God's authority was greater. Lucifer and the angels who had chosen pride were cast down. Their beauty was gone, their radiance stripped. Lucifer fell like lightning, tumbling from the highest heaven into the emptiness below. No longer the morning star, he became Satan, the enemy of God, the prince of darkness. The angels who followed him were cast down too, forming the first armies of darkness. Their light, once brilliant, was now shadowed. Their songs of praise were replaced by murmurs of regret, anger, and defiance. Even in his fall, Lucifer remained clever, full of anger, and filled with hatred for God. He would not be defeated completely. He would oppose God, tempt humans, and try to corrupt creation wherever he could. Heaven was safe, but the war was far from over. From that moment, Lucifer walked the earth in the spiritual realms as the adversary. He was a fallen angel, once radiant, but now darkened. Still powerful and cunning, pride had caused his fall, but it also fueled his determination. Though he had lost heaven, he had not lost the mind and skill that had once made him the morning star. The story of rebellion, sin, and deception had begun. And Lucifer, the prince of darkness, now moved in the shadows of God's creation, waiting and plotting. Lucifer had fallen, thrown from the heavens, clear his throat in music, yet his power was far from gone. Though he no longer walked among the angels of light, he gained authority over darkness and the unseen forces that move through the world. He became known as the Prince of the Air, ruler of the spiritual realm, where sin and temptation could take root. From the shadows, he could influence hearts, twist desires, and shape events without being noticed. He moved across the earth, no longer shining with heavenly light, but still filled with intelligence and cunning. His beauty, though dimmed, could still draw attention. His mind, once devoted to God's service, now focused entirely on rebellion. Every human weakness, pride, envy, anger, greed, and fear became a tool in his hands. He learned how to use them carefully, planting doubt and temptation in ways that could grow over time. Lucifer watched creation closely. Cast from heaven, he could still affect the world God had made. He observed kingdoms rise and fall, noticing how ambition, jealousy, and corruption could bend the hearts of rulers. He whispered into the ears of kings, stirred jealousy, and influenced wars and conflicts from behind the scenes. He became the unseen guide of chaos, turning what was good into something corrupted. He did not rely on open force. His strength lay in deception. A small whisper, a tiny doubt, a hidden temptation. These were his weapons. One sinful choice could lead to another. One act of betrayal could topple a kingdom. He became patient, waiting years, even centuries, for the right moment to act. Carefully exploiting the weaknesses of human hearts, even angels who had remained loyal could sense his influence. He moved through the spiritual realm, accusing and tempting wherever pride or doubt appeared. Stories like Job's would later show his power to test even the righteous. Though God alone set the limits, light still resisted him. Every human who obeyed God and every angel who stayed loyal were reminders that his power, though great, had boundaries. Lucifer also learned to hide his intentions. To humans, he could appear as a helper, a voice of reason, a guide to ambition. He offered what seemed good only to twist it into pride, lust, or greed. Kingdoms rose on his whispers, and wealth, influence, and power became tools for temptation. He became known as the tempter, the adversary, and the father of lies. His satisfaction came from watching humans choose sin while thinking it was their own choice. Even in his cleverness, fear remained in his heart. He knew the promise of a savior had not been broken. Though he ruled the air, he could not stop what God had planned. The one who would defeat him. The light that could not be extinguished would come into the world. Lucifer's plans became sharper, slower, and more patient because he understood that his ultimate defeat was certain, but he would resist until the end. So he moved unseen, a prince of darkness, tempting hearts and testing souls. The world was his stage, humanity his instrument, and pride, envy, and rebellion his tools. The war that began in heaven now continued quietly among men and angels alike. Every whisper, every temptation, every act of sin was part of his plan. The fallen morning star watched and waited, knowing that his story and the story of rebellion was far from over. Lucifer moved quietly, unseen, a shadow in the perfect Garden of Eden. The garden was filled with light, life, and beauty beyond imagining. Rivers flowed like ribbons of crystal. Sunlight danced across the leaves, and every tree bore fruit that tempted the eye and satisfied the body. Birds filled the air with song, and animals walked without fear. The air was sweet with the fragrance of flowers, and every corner of the garden spoke of God's care. Yet even in this paradise, the fallen morning star walked silently, watching, waiting, studying. The first humans, innocent and pure, hearts untested, walking with God and enjoying his presence. They knew no fear, no doubt, no shame. Every moment was filled with joy and wonder. But Lucifer saw their innocence not as beauty, but as opportunity. He would not strike with force. He would not break them. He would work with patience, with cunning, with whispers that could bend their hearts. He took the form of a serpent, sleek and subtle, moving among the trees with a grace that did not alarm. His eyes glinted with intelligence and ambition. "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree?" he asked softly, bending the truth with careful skill. Eve paused, uncertainty flickering in her mind. She had never questioned God's command before, yet now a seed of doubt had been planted. Lucifer spoke patiently, knowing the hearts of humans well. He promised knowledge, wisdom, and understanding beyond their reach. "You will not die," he said. "You will be like God, knowing good and evil." Every word was a trap planted to grow slowly, to feed desire and curiosity. He flattered them, reasoned with them, made the forbidden seem attainable, even necessary. Adam and Eve listened. They wondered. The harmony of their world seemed complete. Yet a small voice inside questioned, could God's love be enough? Was there something more waiting for them? Lucifer whispered again and again, planting thoughts that grew with each passing moment. The humans' hearts, pure and trusting, began to bend under the weight of temptation. Finally, the moment came. Eve reached for the fruit, her hand trembling. Adam followed, drawn by love for her and the desire to share in what she had done. The perfection of Eden broke in that instant. Light shifted, the air seemed heavier, and shame touched their hearts for the first time. Fear replaced trust. Obedience turned into doubt. Innocence faded as the first shadow of sin fell upon creation. Lucifer watched quietly, satisfaction burning in his heart. He had succeeded where even angels had hesitated. He had struck at the heart of God's creation and had led the first humans into rebellion. Pride swelled within him. His patience, cunning, and knowledge of the human heart had won the day. The first act of disobedience was complete, and a new age of struggle had begun. Yet the work was not finished. Adam and Eve fled, confused, ashamed, and aware now of fear, envy, and desire in ways they had never known. Their hearts had changed forever. From this moment, humanity would carry the shadow of temptation with them. Lucifer had opened the door for rebellion, for sin, for a struggle that would continue through every generation. Every human choice, every act of pride or envy would now be shaped by his influence. The garden itself remained beautiful. Rivers still sparkled and the trees still bore fruit. But the presence of the tempter was now woven into the very air. Lucifer, the fallen morning star, had begun his work on the earth. The battle for human hearts had begun. Every whisper, every temptation, every moment of doubt would be part of his plan. He walked among creation unseen, smiling at the knowledge that sin had entered the world. He had turned the hearts of the first humans, and with that act, the war between light and darkness had begun. From the shadowed corners of paradise to the far reaches of the earth, his influence would reach far, subtle yet deadly. The stage was set, the struggle eternal, and the Prince of Darkness moved silently, knowing that his work had begun and would continue for all time. Eden had fallen. The first humans had tasted rebellion, and the world itself began to bear the marks of sin. Lucifer walked unseen among men, shaping hearts, bending minds, and whispering into ears with words so soft, so persuasive that those who heard them did not even realize they were being guided toward darkness. He had become the adversary, the unseen architect of corruption, and he delighted in every choice humans made that drew them away from the Creator. He learned the ways of humanity, studied their desires, and discovered that pride was the most fertile soil for sin. Those who believed themselves great, those who craved recognition, those who longed for what they did not have, these were the easiest to sway. He watched kings and rulers, envying the power they wielded, and he whispered cunning thoughts into their hearts. Ambition, envy, cruelty. One suggestion could topple a kingdom. One lie could ignite a war. He became a master strategist, patient and calculating, knowing that his victories must be subtle to endure. He did not only tempt rulers, he moved in the small corners of life as well, corrupting ordinary hearts. Parents would lie to protect themselves. Children would steal out of greed or jealousy. Neighbors would betray one another over petty disputes. Every act of selfishness, every choice to turn away from truth was a thread in the web he wove across humanity. Civilizations rose, and with them came pride, oppression, and greed, all under his influence. He found delight in human ingenuity, turned to arrogance, in beauty that became vanity, in wealth that became greed. Yet even as he spread corruption, Lucifer never lost sight of the ultimate battle. A promise had been made. A Redeemer would come, born of woman who would crush his head and undo the power he had gained. He studied this promise with cunning and obsession. He could not stop it, but he could prepare the world for it. He would tempt hearts, harden minds, and corrupt institutions, so that when the Redeemer came, his path would not be easy. Humanity would be fragile, their hearts divided, their faith tested. Every sin, every betrayal, every act of rebellion was a step in his strategy to challenge God's plan. He grew patient, methodical, and relentless. Time was his ally. He had seen kingdoms rise and fall, generations pass, at the world change. He learned that subtle influence was more powerful than brute force. He became invisible, yet present everywhere in the palace, the marketplace, the village, the heart. He whispered doubt when faith was strongest, stoked fear when courage burned, and encouraged pride when humility sought to guide. He marveled at the ease with which humans could be manipulated, and he delighted in every moment of moral failure. Lucifer's power over the spiritual realm became apparent in the unfolding of human history. He observed wars that arose from greed, slavery born of envy, oppression fueled by pride. Every act of injustice, every abuse of power, every corruption of law or trust, was another victory for him. He became a silent witness to suffering, not in compassion, but in cunning satisfaction. Human cruelty born from their own hearts became his army, and humanity unwittingly carried out his plans as they pursued their own desires. Yet in the depths of his cunning, a constant tension remained. He knew of the Redeemer, of the coming one who would shine light into the darkness and defeat the Prince of Shadows. This knowledge sharpened his strategies. Every generation, every temptation, every rebellion he inspired was calculated to weaken humanity, to harden hearts, and to sow confusion. He took particular delight in the corruption of faith, twisting devotion into superstition, turning worship into prideful display, and convincing the innocent that sin was freedom. Even the angels who remained loyal to God watched in sorrow as Lucifer's work unfolded. They witnessed kingdoms built on oppression, families torn apart by envy, and hearts hardened against truth. Yet Lucifer continued, the master of deception, the prince of darkness, the invisible hand that guided sin without being seen. Every whispered temptation, every corrupted desire, every act of rebellion drew the world further from light and closer into his shadow. The earth, once a place of harmony, became a stage for his influence. Cities rose, empires clashed, and men invented laws, trade, and systems of justice. Yet these were often twisted by pride and greed, furthering his unseen dominion. He moved like a shadow across every generation, patient, calculating, and tireless. He knew his ultimate defeat was coming. Yet he relished every victory along the way. Every heart turned from God. Every act of corruption as a testament to his cunning. Lucifer, the fallen morning star, had become the eternal adversary, was no longer merely an angel of light, was the tempter of nations, the corrupter of hearts, the prince of the unseen darkness. His work would continue across centuries, shaping the moral and spiritual landscape of humanity and preparing the stage for the coming confrontation with the one who alone could defeat him. The war was no longer only in heaven. It raged silently in every human heart, and Lucifer's hand was always there, guiding, tempting, waiting for the day when the ultimate test would come. Lucifer, though cast from heaven, had not lost his mind, his cleverness, or his ambition. The battle had shifted from open rebellion to quiet warfare. He became the accuser, the one who watched every human action, every thought, every moment of doubt. He moved through the spiritual world and across the earth, observing, tempting, seeking to turn the faithful away from God. His goal was simple but relentless: to make loyalty into fear, devotion into weakness, and faith into despair. From the shadows he watched the righteous, those whose hearts stayed close to God. He whispered doubts into their minds, tempting them with pride, jealousy, or selfish desire. One small mistake, one thought of anger or fear, one moment of impatience, he would magnify it, making humans feel shame or guilt. Where they saw a small flaw, he sowed despair, trying to convince them their sins were too great to be forgiven. Every accusation, even if false, weighed heavily on their hearts, and many struggled under the pressure. Lucifer's work did not stop with humans alone. In the courts of heaven, he accused the faithful before God. Angels and humans alike could feel the force of his words. He pointed to every weakness, every misstep, and every moment of pride, saying that justice demanded punishment. Yet God's mercy was unending, preventing him from having ultimate power. Still, his accusations caused fear, tested hearts, and forced the faithful to hold tightly to righteousness. He found delight in small victories: a father doubting his ability to guide his children, a leader questioning his decisions, a servant of God hesitating before speaking truth. All were moments Lucifer enjoyed. Every faltering heart became a battlefield where he could plant seeds of pride, anger, or despair. He knew that even the most faithful were not immune to doubt, and he waited patiently for that single weakness to grow into a greater fall. Lucifer was patient. He did not rush. He knew that temptation took time, that despair was stronger when humans thought it was their own choice, and that corruption often grew slowly. He worked quietly, shaping circumstances so people by their own will turned from the path of light. He caused divisions in families, jealousy among neighbors, pride among rulers. Every sin, every whispered temptation, and every accusation became part of his plan. He also learned to adjust his approach. Some people resisted, some stayed faithful, some sought God wholeheartedly. These were challenges he met with new methods. Fear, ambition, doubt, flattery, and false promises all became tools in his hands. He studied every generation, every community, and every individual. Each failure made him more determined. Each success taught him how to be even more subtle. Lucifer's presence was invisible, yet it could be felt. The faithful could not see him, but they felt the struggle in their hearts. Every choice, every temptation, every battle with pride or envy bore his influence. The world became his testing ground, a place where light and darkness met, where the hearts of men became the battlefield. And yet he never forgot the ultimate truth: the Redeemer would come. A new light would rise, stronger than his cunning, able to resist his lies and deceptions. This knowledge did not make him weaker. It made him sharper, more patient, more careful. Every temptation, every accusation, and every act of corruption was part of his preparation, a way to fight and delay the coming of the one who would defeat him. Lucifer, the accuser, the enemy, the master of deception, worked quietly, but with careful attention. His strength was not in force, but in cunning, in patience, in the ability to twist hearts while remaining unseen. The faithful felt the struggle, the pressure, the pull of temptation. And in this silent war between light and darkness, Lucifer ruled as the unseen prince of the spiritual world, shaping hearts and minds while waiting for the day when the true light would confront him directly. No longer content with simple temptations, he became the master of deception, shaping the thoughts, choices, and hearts of men and nations alike. His brilliance lay in subtlety. He understood that the grandest victories were won not by force, but by the quiet shaping of perception. A whisper here, a suggestion there, a clever twist of truth. These were enough to bend the will of kings, rulers, and ordinary hearts toward darkness. He roamed unseen across the earth, moving through cities, deserts, forests, and palaces, observing humanity in all its complexity. He studied their desires, ambitions, fears, and dreams. Every human flaw was a tool, every ambition a potential weapon. Pride, envy, lust, greed. He knew them all intimately, and he learned to wield them like a craftsman wields a blade. He could make men believe they acted on their own desires, while subtly guiding them into the shadows he commanded. His influence extended into empires. He whispered into the ears of kings, planting ideas of conquest and tyranny. He stirred jealousy among rulers, sowed discord between nations, and manipulated advisors to counsel cruelty. He delighted in watching empires rise and fall, knowing that even in their victories, humans were shackled by their own pride and ambition. War became a tool of chaos he wielded with precision. Every battlefield a stage for his cunning strategy, yet his power was not limited to rulers or nations. He moved in the hearts of the weak, the tempted, and the curious. A merchant's greed, a soldier's envy, a neighbor's jealousy, all became threads in the web of deception he wove. He twisted truth into lies, virtue into pride, and freedom into indulgence. Humans often saw only the immediate reward, the fleeting pleasure, unaware that their choices were steps along a path carefully orchestrated by the fallen prince. Lucifer also reveled in moral confusion. He blurred the line between right and wrong, making sin appear natural, inevitable, even desirable. He made men doubt their own consciences, question the goodness of God, and trust their own judgment above divine guidance. He created illusions of power and achievement, convincing humans that they could ascend on their own strength while ignoring the consequences of disobedience. Every human success achieved through pride or selfishness became a victory in his unseen war. He thrived on division. Families turned against one another. Communities fractured, friendships crumbled. The seeds he planted in human hearts grew into forests of betrayal, corruption, and strife. He encouraged false leaders, idol worship, and deceitful laws, turning human institutions into tools of chaos. No corner of society was safe from his influence, and no human heart was beyond the reach of his cunning. Yet even as he wove his web of deception, Lucifer never underestimated the faithful. He studied them, probing their strengths and weaknesses, finding subtle ways to test their loyalty. Patience was his greatest weapon. He understood that true corruption often took time, that temptation needed to be gradual, and that despair could be as deadly as overt sin. He became a master of timing, striking only when his influence could bear fruit most effectively. Always he kept the ultimate goal in mind. The Redeemer was coming. And Lucifer knew that no matter how many hearts he deceived, no matter how many kingdoms fell into ruin, he would eventually face the one who could destroy his power. Yet he did not despair. Instead, he sharpened his strategies, refined his methods, and strengthened his network of shadows. He was the prince of the unseen, the architect of lies, the master of deception, and he would continue his work until the final confrontation. In every whisper, every temptation, every act of subtle manipulation, Lucifer's presence was felt. Humanity moved as he guided, often unaware of the invisible hand shaping their destinies. From the halls of kings to the quiet corners of villages, from the marketplaces to the courts of justice, his influence stretched far and wide. The world itself became a theater of his deception, and he moved through it with relentless patience, knowing that every act of sin, every betrayal, every flicker of pride fed the power of darkness and extended the reach of his unseen kingdom. Lucifer, the master of deception, walked the earth, and the unseen spiritual realms alike, ever vigilant, ever cunning, ever patient. The war between light and darkness had moved from Eden to every human heart, and he reigned as the invisible sovereign of lies, the tempter of kings and common men alike, the adversary whose cunning would test humanity for generations to come. Lucifer's dominion had grown far beyond Eden. The battle was no longer only in the garden or in the hearts of men. It had spread across the unseen spiritual realms. A hidden war of light and darkness, of truth and lies, of obedience and rebellion. The heavens were no longer calm. Angels loyal to God moved with purpose and radiance, while the fallen moved with cunning and malice, shaping the unseen currents that swayed the human world. Lucifer led his followers with the authority of a king and the precision of a master. Every fallen angel under his command understood their mission: to tempt, to deceive, to corrupt, and to destroy where possible. Yet the greatest victories were never battles fought with swords or fire. His victories were earned in silence, in subtle manipulation, in planting doubt, fear, and pride into hearts. He moved unseen. Yet his presence was felt wherever humans wavered, wherever faith faltered, wherever desire overcame reason. He watched nations rise and fall, and he saw the weakness of men and their rulers and generals. A king's ambition, a ruler's envy, a general's fear, all became his tools. He whispered ideas into hearts, bending empires toward greed and pride. Wars erupted, but their true spark often lay in the subtle push of the fallen prince. One suggestion, one fleeting thought, one whispered temptation could change the course of history. He delighted in this, for men believed their choices were their own, even as he guided them into ruin. Yet Lucifer's work was not only in kings and rulers. He reached into the hearts of ordinary men and women, a father doubting his decisions, child grasping for attention, a neighbor feeling envy or resentment. Each became a battlefield, each a place where his cunning hand could leave a mark. He thrived in the quiet moments, the small decisions, the choices made when no one was watching. Every act of selfishness, every betrayal, every small sin became a victory in his growing kingdom of shadows. He also sowed division wherever he could. Families torn by anger, communities divided by jealousy, friendships broken by lies. All were part of his grand design. He twisted truth into falsehood, virtue into pride, kindness into manipulation. Every act of sin, every moment of weakness, every decision turned away from God's way, expanded his influence. The world became a theater for his schemes, and every human heart was a stage for his deception. Lucifer's patience was endless. He did not rush. He knew that lasting corruption took time. A single act of temptation might fail, but years, decades, or generations could cultivate the seeds he planted into forests of rebellion. He'd learned to wait, to observe, to strike only when the moment would produce the greatest effect. He became a master of timing, a tactician of darkness, unseen yet everywhere, working quietly, invisibly, relentlessly. Even the angels loyal to God watched with sorrow as the shadow spread. They saw empires built on greed, wars fought in pride, and hearts hardened in rebellion. Yet, no matter how many battles Lucifer won, he never forgot the promise of the Redeemer, the coming light who would confront him and undo his works. This knowledge did not weaken him. Instead, it sharpened his mind, honed his strategies, and strengthened his patience. He would delay, deceive, and corrupt as long as possible, for even a fallen angel must fight for every heart he could influence. The war of shadows was not merely a struggle of force, but of subtlety. It moved in quiet whispers, in stolen moments, in thoughts of doubt, anger, and pride. Every temptation resisted was a small defeat for him, but every sin embraced was a triumph. He measured his victories not by the fall of kingdoms, but by the bending of hearts, the turning of souls, and the spread of darkness where light once reigned. Lucifer walked among humans and angels alike, unseen, yet always watching. Every whisper he planted, every fear he nurtured, every act of pride he encouraged became another link in the chain of rebellion that stretched across the earth. The world itself, filled with men and women, kingdoms and cities, became his battlefield. He was the architect of shadows, the master of deception, the prince of darkness, moving patiently, silently, and relentlessly. The war was long and the struggle immense, but Lucifer did not tire. His hand guided humanity. His whispers shaped history, and his presence haunted hearts. The light still existed, and God's faithful remained. But the Prince of Shadows would continue to work unseen, unchallenged in his domain until the day of the final confrontation, when all that he had built in darkness would meet the power of the light. Until then, the war of shadows raged on, silent, invisible, and eternal. Lucifer, the fallen morning star, turned his gaze to the thrones of the earth. Human rulers, kings, emperors, and generals, all were pieces on a vast board, and he the unseen hand moving them. He did not appear before them in brilliance, for pride would reject obvious authority. Instead, he whispered doubts, stirred ambition, and fed desires. A fleeting thought of envy, a longing for power, a seed of suspicion. These were his arrows, invisible yet precise. One corrupt decision could topple a kingdom. One lustful desire could betray a nation. He delighted in the temptations of kings, for their choices shaped the lives of millions. A ruler who acted in pride, wrath, or greed became a vessel for his will. Wars erupted, wealth was hoarded, the innocent suffered, and he watched with satisfaction knowing that the darkness of the heart could shape the course of history. Even victories achieved by the ambitious often served his plans. For in pride and vanity, men fell under his sway. Lucifer's cunning extended into alliances and betrayals. He whispered suspicion into the hearts of counselors, envy into the minds of generals, and fear into the hearts of nations. One alliance would crumble, one kingdom would turn on another, all orchestrated by his patient hand. He thrived in chaos, knowing that human ambition, unchecked by humility or obedience, was his greatest tool. Every act of war, every unjust law, every betrayal of trust became a victory in his unseen campaign. Yet he did not stop at mere rulers. He reached into the hearts of advisors, ministers, and soldiers. Each heart swayed by ambition or fear was a triumph. Every compromise of morality, every choice to follow selfish desire over righteousness expanded his influence. He created layers of corruption, networks of sin, and systems of deception that shaped generations. Humans often believe themselves the architects of history, unaware of the hidden power guiding them toward ruin. Even the faithful kings, those who sought justice and righteousness, were tested. He planted doubts and fears, whispering lies that bent their judgments. One hesitation, one moment of anger, one lapse of trust could lead to disaster. He was patient, waiting for the precise moment when weakness appeared, striking subtly but effectively. His influence was invisible, yet its consequences were seen across kingdoms and generations. Lucifer's ultimate goal was not merely to control men, but to turn the world away from God. He sought to corrupt the very foundations of society. Justice twisted into oppression, wealth hoarded through greed, worship corrupted by pride. He delighted in the arrogance of men, knowing that each act of self-exaltation, each act of rebellion furthered his unseen kingdom. Cities rose and fell under his guidance. Empires waged war on each other, often blinded by ambition or fear he had planted. Yet even as he shaped kings and nations, he knew the Redeemer's coming was inevitable. Every victory was temporary. Every corrupted heart could yet be restored by God's light. But this did not weaken him, strengthened his patience, and sharpened his strategy. He learned to plan for centuries, to manipulate generations, and to wait for the perfect moment to sow maximum chaos. His hand touched every throne, yet remained unseen. His influence shaped the rise and fall of civilizations, yet the world believed its destiny was of its own making. Lucifer, the tempter of kings, the unseen ruler behind ambition and pride, moved silently across the earth, weaving his web of sin and deception. History became his battlefield, and human hearts the instruments of his war. Every act of injustice, every betrayal, every lust for power, every corrupt decision was a step in his grand design to oppose God's plan. And yet the light of the Redeemer lingered, a distant but unyielding force, ready to confront the prince of darkness and undo all that he had built. Lucifer, the morning star, the brightest of all created angels, had walked through the ages in rebellion. He had been radiant, full of wisdom and glory, once closest to God's throne. But pride had consumed him. Now he was the master of darkness, the deceiver of men, the tempter of kings, the accuser of the faithful. For millennia, he had moved unseen, weaving his plans, bending hearts, stirring kingdoms, spreading chaos, and testing the loyalty of men and angels alike. Yet the end of his long rebellion was near. The heavens themselves stirred. Light, pure and unstoppable, began to gather strength. Angels loyal to God moved with radiant purpose, shining like a host of stars. Every act of rebellion Lucifer had performed. Every whispered temptation, every corrupted heart now faced judgment. He could feel the pull of the coming confrontation. A great light unlike any he had ever known approached. The Redeemer had come into the world, and his presence would confront every scheme Lucifer had ever devised. Lucifer's pride burned hotter than ever. It deceived kings, toppled nations, and turned humanity's hearts towards sin. For centuries, he had whispered envy into rulers, pride into leaders, and fear into the hearts of the faithful. He had moved silently, unseen, yet his power had seemed absolute. And now, for the first time, he faced a force he could not deceive, a power he could not twist, a light that would not falter. The battle began not with fire or swords, but in the unseen realms. Lucifer, gathering all his fallen angels, prepared for confrontation. Their wings black as night, their eyes burning with fury. They moved like shadows across the heavens. He whispered commands, sharpened their cunning, and reminded them of their strength. Yet even as he rallied them, the light grew brighter, unwavering, casting shadows aside. Angels loyal to God surrounded them, brilliant and unshakable, a host beyond number. Lucifer struck with all the wisdom and power he had accumulated over countless ages. He hurled accusations, sowed confusion, and unleashed waves of darkness. He moved through human hearts as well, tempting, deceiving, and testing, trying to turn even a single soul away from the Redeemer. But every attempt failed. Pride, fear, and envy faltered before the steadfast light of God. The very air of heaven seemed to resist him. Time itself seemed to slow as the final confrontation unfolded. Every battle Lucifer had fought, every kingdom he had bent, every empire he had corrupted now faced the inevitable reckoning. Men's hearts, which he had tried to twist, now drew toward truth. Generations that he had manipulated, nations he had deceived, and families he had divided all felt the invisible hand of justice pressing down. Even the proudest rulers, influenced by his whispers, now faced the reality that their choices could not withstand the light. Lucifer roared in fury. His pride, which had been his glory, became his torment. He hurled his fallen angels into battle one last time. Shadows stretched like a living ocean, dark and powerful, seeking to resist the unstoppable. Yet for every soul they sought to claim, there was a faithful heart standing firm. Every deception, every lie, every temptation melted before the radiant justice of God. The morning star's power, vast and terrifying through the ages, began to crumble. The Redeemer, shining brighter than the sun, descended into the midst of the conflict. Lucifer felt the full weight of the divine presence. Every whisper of doubt, every seed of corruption he had sown was undone. Every soul he had tried to twist toward darkness was drawn toward the light. He lashed out in anger, striking with all his cunning and might, but it was useless. His strategies honed over millennia failed. His patience, his knowledge, his mastery of deception, all proved powerless against the unyielding light. Finally, the morning star himself was cast down. His wings, once radiant, now blackened and torn. His followers fell with him, howling into the abyss, prepared for rebellion. The heavens shook, the earth trembled, and the shadows that had haunted creation for eons vanished before the radiance of eternal justice. Every act of sin, every empire corrupted, every whisper of temptation, all came to an end. Yet even in defeat, Lucifer did not yield his pride. He roared and raged, refusing to bow, even as he was imprisoned in darkness. His brilliance, once unmatched, was broken, his power undone, but his hatred remained. He had become a warning, a shadow of what pride and rebellion could bring. The faithful angels watched, their hearts steady as the morning star was sealed away, never to rise again. The world, freed from the full weight of his influence, began to feel the restoration of light. Humanity, though still tempted by sin, was offered a path of truth, a chance to resist the darkness. The kingdoms of the earth, once shaped by his cunning, now faced the consequences of their choices. And yet, the story of Lucifer, the brightest of angels who fell, remained. A reminder that even the greatest created being could be humbled before God. The morning star's end was final. Shadows receded, the faithful rejoiced, and the light of God shone brighter than ever. Lucifer, once radiant, now remained in the abyss. A prisoner of his own pride, a symbol of rebellion, and a warning to all creation. The war was over. The kingdom of darkness broken, and the eternal light of God reigned supreme. Even after the morning star's end, the memory of Lucifer lingered in the hearts and minds of all creation. Though he had been cast into the final darkness, his influence had left traces in the world. Shadows of pride, envy, and deceit still lingered in human hearts. The war between obedience and rebellion had not vanished. For the choice between light and darkness would continue in every generation. The fallen one no longer walked openly in the world, but his whispers could still be felt in subtle ways. Every act of selfishness, every surge of anger, every turn from kindness or mercy could be traced back to the first seed of rebellion he had planted long ago. Humanity now faced the task of choosing God's light in a world still marked by the shadow he had left behind. Angels moved among the nations, guiding, protecting, and strengthening those who sought the Creator. They brought warnings and encouragement, showing the power of obedience, the strength of faith, and the blessings of humility. The legacy of Lucifer had become a test for all who lived after him to resist temptation, to trust in God, and to carry light into places touched by darkness. Lucifer himself existed in the eternal abyss, a being of memory and wrath. He could no longer influence the faithful directly, but he watched, seething with pride, regret, and defiance. He remembered the heights he had once held, the praise he had received, and the brilliance of the throne room of heaven. Now he was a prisoner of his own rebellion, a warning carved into the story of creation itself. Yet in this place of darkness, a new thought stirred within him. Not hope, not redemption, but a simmering desire to be remembered. Even in defeat, he sought a way to shape the world through fear and legend. Stories of his cunning, his fall, and his influence would be told among humans, whispered in shadows, and remembered in cautionary tales. In this, he found a bitter comfort. Though he could not rise again, his name would endure as a symbol of rebellion and pride. Meanwhile, humanity began to rebuild its understanding of God, of obedience, and of the dangers that lurked in hearts unchecked. The story of the fallen angel became both warning and guidance. Faithful hearts learned that evil could be resisted, that sin could be overcome, and that every choice mattered. Each generation faced its own trials, but the light of God shone brighter than the shadow that remained. The spiritual realm, though cleansed of the rebels, remained vigilant. Angels who had witnessed the rise and fall of Lucifer continued their service, guarding creation, guiding humanity, and ensuring that the freedom to choose did not become a freedom to rebel without consequence. And so the story moved forward. Though the morning star had ended, the lessons of his life and fall remained. Creation was forever changed. Not because the shadow could triumph, but because every heart now carried the memory of the one who had tried. Darkness had been defeated, but its echoes endured, shaping courage, faith, and the constant struggle to choose light over pride. The war had not returned in full, but its mark was permanent. Every act of defiance, every choice of humility, every victory of faith was a reminder that even in defeat, the story of rebellion could teach wisdom. The morning star was gone, yet the struggle between light and shadow, obedience and pride, continued in every heart, in every human story for all time. The world moved forward, and generations of men and women lived and died. Yet the memory of the morning star never faded. Though Lucifer had been cast into the deepest darkness, his story remained, whispered among angels, carried in the hearts of humanity, and remembered in the heavens. His rise and fall became a warning, a tale of pride, ambition, and rebellion against the Creator. Angels and humans alike saw in him the danger of turning away from God, the cost of seeking power above obedience, and the peril of forgetting humility. The earth was filled with light, but shadows still lingered in hearts. Every act of envy, greed, selfishness, or pride carried a trace of the fallen angel's influence. Humanity faced these shadows in small ways and great. A leader might be tempted by ambition, a parent by anger, a child by disobedience. Each time the choice was theirs to make. In these trials, men and women learned to resist, to trust God, and to cling to what was right. The memory of the morning star became a guide, a silent teacher, showing what happens when pride grows stronger than faith. Angels walked unseen among humanity, offering guidance, protection, and comfort. They whispered courage to the fearful, steadied the hearts of the weak, and reminded the faithful that God's light could overcome even the darkest trials. Every faithful soul became a beacon of hope, a small victory over the shadows left behind by Lucifer. Each act of obedience, kindness, and mercy was a triumph against the rebellion that had once shaken heaven. Lucifer himself remained in the eternal abyss, a being of memory, anger, and regret. He could no longer touch the faithful directly, yet he felt the world turning against him. Every act of righteousness, every choice to follow God, every heart that resisted pride and temptation was a silent rebuke to him. The one who had sought to rival God now could only watch as his own plans were undone by the free will and faithfulness of creation. Even in defeat, Lucifer's story served a purpose. Creation learned through his rise and fall. He had once been the brightest of all angels, the morning star, full of beauty, wisdom, and light. Yet, even he had fallen when pride took root in his heart. His rebellion became a lesson. No gift, no talent, no brilliance can save a soul from the consequences of pride and disobedience. His cunning, his patience, and his power were strong, but they could never overcome the eternal light and justice of God. The lesson endured for all time. Angels remembered it. Every age faced its own trials, its own temptations, its own battles between light and shadow. Pride led to downfall, but humility brought blessing. Obedience and faithfulness drew the favor of God, and the light always triumphed over darkness, no matter how cunning or patient the shadow might be. Clear as throat, yet the story of Lucifer also carried hope. It showed that even when temptation is strong, when the shadow seems close, light can overcome. It reminded the faithful that every heart has the power to choose, that every soul can resist the darkness, and that every act of courage and faith matters. The fallen morning star's legacy was both a warning and a guide, a shadow that taught the value of light. In the heavens, the angels rejoiced in the eternal victory of God. On the earth, humans carried forward the knowledge that choices have consequences, that sin leads to sorrow, and that faith can triumph against even the most patient and cunning of deceivers. The battle between pride and humility, sin and righteousness, light and darkness, continued in every heart. But the eternal truth remained clear. God's light cannot be overcome, and love, faith, and obedience endure beyond all shadow. Lucifer, the adversary, the tempter, the accuser, was defeated. Yet his story remained etched in creation. It was a story to be remembered to teach wisdom, to guide the faithful, and to warn against the dangers of pride. His brilliance, which had once lit the heavens, had been turned into a shadow, a lesson, a cautionary tale. And in this way, the morning star's story continued, not in glory, but in memory, forever teaching the eternal lesson. The light of God is eternal, and the shadow of rebellion can never triumph over it. And so the world moved on. Light filled the heavens and the earth. Humanity, though still tested, knew the way of obedience, humility, and faith. The shadow of the fallen morning star lingered, but only as a reminder that every heart has the choice to follow God or to follow pride. The war had ended, the lesson was eternal, and the light of God shone brighter than ever.